very fortunate that all of the multilateral development banks coordinate very closely and share knowledge on how to address common concerns. So we had the working group on the environment of all of the major banks. And they all came to Manila to talk about how collectively we can do a better job on protecting the environment and on environmental impact assessment and a number of other issues. We thought we'd take the opportunity to bring some of our colleagues to one of the Coral Triangle Initiative sites here in the Philippines so that they could see for themselves some of the work that WWF and local communities are doing to protect coastal resources. And the intent here is that they could learn from lessons here and apply them elsewhere in the world. And what I think they could learn about here is how in the Philippines communities are coming together to protect these resources, to work on monitoring of fishing, excluding fisher folk who are not playing by the rules, so that the resource can bounce back.
What's been really interesting for me visiting this site here at Pico de Loro is the collaboration between an NGO, WWF, a large corporate chain with the Hamilo Coast resort, and how they've come together with local communities and also the local municipality. But what's also a huge challenge with this is that while they're doing really good work at the local level, to really be able to manage these local coastal resources, coral reefs and fisheries, it depends a lot on broader management outside of the area that they can influence. So there's a need for sort of a broader partnership to really make this sustainable. But this idea ties in really well with the work that the Philippines government is doing with partners including ADB on the Coral Triangle Initiative. So I'd like to see how we can scale this up as a good example, as a good model, but it has to be integrated and it has to be happening all over the coast in the Philippines. So that for me is the really interesting challenge, is to see how we can go from here up across the country.
Normally the bank would not finance this type of project simply if it were a hotel. But the fact that there are both conservation and livelihood aspects that have been integrated into the project, it would make it more attractive to EIB financing. The EIB does projects where it thinks it can add value. This is to offset the fact that we bring attractive finance to the table and therefore it's a very scarce resource. In this particular case, it's clear from the field visit that very good work is being done on conservation in the marine environment. And this is being done in a way that incorporates local communities with a view to enhancing livelihoods. So this is something that would a priori appeal to the EIB.
One of the things we looked at today is this whole question of how can you have public-private partnerships to promote both economic growth as well as conservation. And what I thought was extremely interesting was the way they had been able to include economic development in the area, conservation, but also engagement of the community. They've been able to generate jobs here and starting to test approaches for marine conservation and coastal conservation. I think one of the concerns that I would have and one of the challenges that I recognize is how does a private sector body work with the government to make certain that the protection standards on the marine environment are maintained despite very substantial pressure from encroachment. In this case, larger fishing boats are reported to have been visiting the waters and causing disruptions of some of the conservation benefits. The other thing that I thought was really interesting that we saw today was how we were able to work with fishermen who had converted and changed their ways. So I'm very encouraged. But I think one of the things we need to do is to closely work with a whole range of these types of tests and then draw some lessons learned. Not to test whether you can have a public-private partnership to deal with marine and coastal management. I think that's well proven. The real question is how can we enhance these, broaden these, and make them more part of how we work on development.
It's important also that we learn from the lessons that they have been learning in Latin America, in Africa, and try and feed that here, feed that into the process here as well. And I think really it's lessons of success. Success breeds success. And so what we need is models that can be upscaled and replicated, both in the Philippines, more widely in the region, but also in other regions of the world.